Hi, on this week's video we will be building in a quite different way from the last video where I said that I didn't use any dowels or dominoes, because on this one we will have more than enough dowels to finish the whole project. First of all, I've had this project on my to-do list for quite a while already, and now that I had the custom work for the clients done at the end of last year, I was able to pick up on this one. I actually started this project already on September, but then I had to take some time off from the shop, then finish all the client work, so I had to put this one on a pause for a couple of months. So, we've been living in our house now for almost 3 years, but we haven't had a proper solution or place to put all of our shoes so far. So, this project is to fix that issue. As you probably saw on the thumbnail, I'm making a shoe shelf which has also a coat hanger on it as well. So the design is quite simple. I'm building it from birch, so I need to cut a lot of these strips from it so I can build the shelves for the shoes and then build the whole frame for the coat hanger so it can stand on its own and it doesn't be drilled or hooked up into a wall or anything. When I designed the thing on my computer, I really liked how it turned out, and I was a bit cautious or skeptical that how I will build it when I get to it, because I know that building these things with dowels is a really painful process to do, and that's something that I will learn later down on the video, that it is just as bad as I thought it would be. So cutting all the pieces was quite a simple process. First stripping down the boards to get the strips that I needed, and then using the sliding table on the table saw with a stop block cutting all the pieces to size. And then the next part would be sanding them, because it was way easier to sand these individual pieces now rather than wait till everything's glued up. And to make the sanding a bit more quicker, I clapped some of the pieces together so I could sand 3 of them at a time to make it a bit more doable. Then after the sanding, I actually put the project down for 3 months because I had the client work that I mentioned earlier, the table that I had the last video on, and then some other pieces that I didn't make videos about. But then finally Christmas came and I had the time off from work, which meant that I could spend some time in the shop as well, which meant that I could begin the most tedious part of this project, which was prepping all the joinery. I know that you could do this in multiple different ways. You could use more traditional joinery, but I think that cutting that would be even more tedious than doing it with dowels. I think the easiest way to do this would be with a domino, because doing the joinery, aligning it, making sure that everything lines up nicely would be probably way easier than with a doweling jig. So, as you saw earlier, I used the doweling jig to drill the first holes on the other parts, on the end grain of the pieces, and then using marking pins, I marked down the corresponding locations on the other pieces, and I marked down some lines on the center of the long pieces and on the center of on the locations where the centers would need to be on the other piece, so I could line up the lines and then just push the pieces together and have the marking pins leave a small indent there, so I would know where to drill the other hole to. Then to drill the other holes, I used the drill press because I thought that that would be the easiest way to just drill them straight to the piece, and I wouldn't have to set up any drill guides or anything. I could just use the stop block on the drill or the depth setting and then just go on and drill all the holes. Once all that was done, I could just glue up the hat shelf and have that done. And after that, I could finally move on to the next part of the build and start assembling the shelves for the shoes. I need to make 2 of these, so there's quite many dowel holes to be prepped for this. I did a similar design for the shelf on one of the cabinets that I built some time ago, and already then I was kind of decided I wouldn't use this kind of slat design on anything because gluing these up is really annoying. You have so many dowel holes that you need to line up, so it becomes pretty tricky, and because you want to do it before the glue starts to dry up, you don't have that much time to do it. But here we can see I did and designed something again that would use the same design, and this time I had to do 3 of the shelves, the hat shelf, 2 of the shelves for the shoes to get this done. So yeah, maybe I learn my lesson this time. Let's see. Then to make the legs or the frame, to make this whole thing stand up, I had to cut the pieces to be the exact same size, and as I don't have a stop block on my miter saw, I thought that the easiest way is just that I'll tape the 2 pieces together when I cut them, so I know that they will be identical when I'm done. Then again, to mark the dowel locations on these pieces, I first mark down on the legs that where I would need to drill the holes, and then using again the marking pins, I mark down the location on the other piece to know where to drill the holes as well. If you've made it this far and are enjoying the video, please leave it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. It helps these videos to spread out to more people. I think you could use the drawings if you are sure that everything's built specifically as you have drawn it on the computer, so you could get the specific angle to make the cut to the top where the 2 legs meet up. But I did make some small changes during the way, and I think it's always better to take the measurements from your actual work rather than to rely on the plans, because things might change a bit during the way. But I laid it up on the floor, marked down where to do the cuts, then used a speed square that I clamped onto the piece, and with my circular saw cut the angle on there. I couldn't cut the angle on my miter saw, or I would have needed to attach some sort of jig to make this cut because the angle is pretty weird, so it would have been a bit more tricky. So I thought that the easiest way is just to use the circular saw with some guide to make the cut. Then once the cut was done, it was time again to drill some holes and align some dowels to make the connection on these 2 pieces. And even though I said that making this whole project would have been much easier with the domino, I think this is a good showcase that you don't need the domino to build something. You can use doweling jig, which is a fraction of the cost of the domino. I think here in Europe, even the smaller domino runs somewhere about 1,000 euros or so, and you can get these doweling jigs for less than 20 euros or something like that. So you don't need to have all the expensive fancy tools to build something, but it makes life much easier, obviously, and things quicker. Then on purpose, I left the other legs too long at first because they were cut on a weird angle. So to make sure that everything sits flat when I'm done, I left them oversized and then used a scrap piece of wood that was the same length as the overhang on the first leg, mark down where to make the cut, and then again use the circular saw to make the cut so it would be at a right angle as well. Then, even though on the hat shelf there won't be anything heavy I still think there needs to be a supporting piece because just having the butt joint with dowels won't probably be that strong and hold the weight of the shelf plus anything that's on the shelf. So I will be adding these more diagonal pieces, and to make the cuts for these I realized that since these are small enough I can just easily do that on the bandsaw that I now have. And now that I had all the pieces ready and the joinery prepped for most of them, it was time to start the assembly or the major assembly for this one. So attaching the shelves to the legs and kind of having it almost ready at this point. Doing this assembly was a bit tricky because the piece is rather big, a lot of these thin parts moving around, so everything's a bit flimsy. So another thing that I didn't like about this project and which made me think that I will probably never do this again was that assembling this with the dominoes and everything, oh, with the dowels, was just a really annoying process. But once that glue up had dried up, it was time to start putting the hat shelf on its place. So first I marked down the location for the dowels for the butt joints before I would start lining up the diagonal pieces, because then I would have somewhere for the shelf to sit down before I add the other pieces. And on these I also left them longer than they need to be, so once I have them attached I can just use the speed square and line up where I need to make the cut to make sure that the hat shelf sits straight on top of the whole thing. And as you've seen on this project, there's multiple ways to make the angled cuts, and on this one I went with the miter saw as the piece was long enough to hold it safely. The angle wasn't too steep, so I could just cut it on my miter saw and make sure that the two pieces are exactly the same. Then I could just spread some glue and glue the pieces together. I didn't add too many clamps for this because I don't think there needs to be that much clamping force to hold these together, as it would be just laying on top of this and there won't be any kind of force into it that would pull it away. So I think it's plenty like that. Then, as I said, I would also use this as a coat hanger, and for obvious reasons I need something to hang the coats and whatnots on. So instead of buying something pre-made, I thought that I'll just make these small triangles myself and then screw them on place so I can have everything custom made for this piece. So after I had made the first sample piece, I just used that as a template, drew more of these on a piece of birch, and I made sure that the grain is running throughout the whole piece, so then it should be a bit more stronger than it would be if the grain is going in another way. Then I just roughly cut them off with the bandsaw and then use the oscillating sander to sand all the faces down so that the pieces would be about the same size. I know that they are not precisely the same, but that doesn't really matter in this case. Then it was just time for the last hand sanding, sanding all the edges on these small pieces so that there aren't any splinters coming out or that they don't rip out any of the tags from the clothes or anything like that. And to attach these, I will just screw them on throughout one of the slats from the back side instead of using dowels, because I think we already have enough dowels on this piece. I did the math and I ended up with 208 dowels on this piece alone, which is quite many dowels and dowel holes that I've had to make. So I don't really want to do anything with dowels for a while now, but let's see how long that will stay like that. Then the next and almost final step was to do the finishing. I'm using Rubio monocoat like with most of the things I do, and I've really started to like the color of Mist 5%. We have now multiple pieces in our house that have been finished with that color, so I went and used that on this one as well. Once the finish had dried a couple of days, then it was just time to drill or screw the coat hangers on, and after that the piece was done. It's also a really nice feeling now because for the last few months I've had different projects laying around in the shop as I've had to post this one and I've been working on multiple client things at the same time. And I usually like to work on a one project at a time. So now that I've cleared all the in progress things from the shop, it's really nice that there's actually some space now. The tables are not filled with pieces for different projects, and I can actually start planning something new rather than just kind of work on things that I've been working on for months, because that gets a bit boring at a certain point. But I doubt that I'll build this one never again, but you never know. But this wasn't my favorite piece to build, but at least it looks nice and it's very useful for us. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.